Hello, folks. Welcome to Animation One-to-Ones, the podcast series brought to you by Squiggly Online Animation Magazine. This is Ben Mitchell, Editor-in-Chief here at Squiggly, very excited to bring you a really interesting chat between new contributor Penny Whitehouse and storyboard artist come director Alex Davy, presently of Blue Zoo. Born in London and based in Newcastle, Alex's work in storyboards includes projects such as BBC Bitesize with Arcus Studios, Incredible Ant at Wildseed Studios, Norman Picklestripes for Factory Create, and a range of shows at Blue Zoo including Millie Lou and the second season of Pip Posy. Last year, Alex's role within the studio expanded to shorts directing with her successful pitch on a short film for the charity Beyond Equality, who wanted to explore the concept of the Armour of Masculinity, or man box, that young men find themselves socially pressured to stay within. The resulting film, Armour, tells the story of James, a young man who feels obliged to speak and act a certain way to impress his friends, only serving to alienate a female classmate he has a crush on. Released toward the end of last year, Armour is the latest short film from Blue Zoo following such celebrated offerings as Daddy Christmas, Lynx Birds, Mamoon, Sinking Feeling, Ada, and In Shape. It's a great piece of work, told very effectively, and I really enjoyed listening to the story behind how it came together, as well as Alex's experiences in the industry, and I'm sure you all will too. So I'm going to stop talking and hand it over to Penny Whitehouse and Alex Davy.
It's interesting seeing like how you've sort of developed from like your early sketches on Instagram to the work you're doing
you've
now.
Done a proper deep dive.
Yeah, no, sorry.
Yeah, I suppose it's one of those things, isn't it? As you get older and sort of more established and get your sort of feet kind of firmly in the ground, that kind of side of things does fizzle out a little bit. Like when you're younger, you're like, look what I've drawn. But then as you get busier, you sort of, I'm very quiet these days.
Yeah, but that's good because you're busy and you've just
exactly. Yeah.
I mean, well, so I'll get on to the short you directed in a bit, but maybe let's start off with your life as a storyboard artist.
Oh my gosh. I wasn't expecting this. I thought it would be I don't know what I expected, I suppose, but I didn't expect anybody want to know about me. I thought it'd be all about the show.
All right, well, let's dial it back even further. Do you want to give me a little bit of background about yourself?
Sure. I mean, I've given lots of talks at universities and I did Animex this year. That was fun. And I do have a story that seems to sort of perk up the ears if the room's getting a little bit sleepy, and you talk to students and sometimes you can see that kind of look in their eyes, just like, oh. Yeah. So I didn't think that I could have a job doing anything creative. I've always drawn and I've always loved animation, but I didn't grow up thinking that was any sort of career. I guess in the early 2000s, growing up in the countryside, it just was unheard of. Careers advisors back then, I think they probably did their best, but it was the case of like, go and do an art degree. And I was like, I don't really want to do an art degree. I don't want to do fine art. I want to have a trade. I want to have a job. There must be something that I can do with the fact that I'm getting good grades in, art GCSE or whatever it is. But back then it was like a shrug emoji. Well, they just didn't know. So it was like, right, you either have to go and do fine art or you have to do graphic design. And that was it. That's
exactly what I got told. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it was just the early 2000s, I'm talking like this is 2003, 4, so a while ago. And I got into, I'm not very academically gifted, so I got into one university out of my 5 choices, which was Newcastle University, and that was fun because I picked that one as a joke. It was called the Combined Studies in Arts. And I remember saying to my friend, they had the old IT lounges back in the day at school. And I said, right, I need to have one more pick for UCAS. I don't know. What do you think? What's this one? Combined Studies in Arts, Ancient History, English literature and life drawing. And she was like, yeah, do that one. So I was like, okay, I'll put that one down. That's the only one I got into. So I thought, right, okay, I guess I'm moving to Newcastle then. And it was a course that had 3 tiers of it. So you had to do English literature, ancient history, which I'd never studied in my life.
Yeah.
I didn't even do history GCSE or A-level, but I somehow got on this course.
It was a very unique course, yeah.
Yeah, well, I picked it as a joke. And the life drawing. So the life drawing, I was like, oh, this is fantastic. And I'm getting really high marks for life drawing. And then I'm failing, unbelievably failing in the other 2. And so consequently in my first year, I got kicked out because you can't just have good grades in life drawing. You know, yeah. I sort of hoped it would carry me through. Mm-hmm. That's not really how basic maths works. So I got kicked out and I thought, oh God, what am I going to do now? My mum's going to kill me. So I thought, I know I'll get a job where I have to wear a suit because she'll be less cross with me. So I got a job.
Logic, yeah.
Yeah, that's mum logic, isn't it? So I got a job as a jeweler in a very swanky jewellers called Reed & Sons up here in Newcastle. And I managed to put off telling mum for 6 months that I hadn't been going to university because I got booted out. And when she found out, it worked. She was quite happy at the fact that I was wearing a suit. So when I was here, oh hello, Kath.
Here's my cat, absolutely.
I have the same. If you see the tail go past, yeah, I have the same. So whilst I promise you, I'm going somewhere with this. So whilst I was there, we were talking, my manager and my colleagues and I, about Strictly Come Dancing, and my assistant manager, had a lot of things to say in quite a lot of detail about it. She knew things about, you know, the person extending their arm the right way, or hands, or different technical terms for the twirls and, you know, whatever. And I said to her, how come you know so much about ballroom dancing? And she said, oh, I used to be a ballroom dance teacher and I loved it. And I used to really want to have my own studio and I used to want to do this, that and other. And I said, well, what happened? Because I knew she'd been at the shop for at least 7 years. And she said, well, you know, I moved and I had my daughter, you know, and then I got married and then we bought a house and then this and that. And I just sort of stayed where I was. And I didn't have time for ballroom dancing anymore. And that conversation absolutely terrified me. Yeah. Because I could see it happening to me. It was a nice job. I wasn't earning very much, but it was fine. I liked my colleagues. And I thought, oh shit, that's going to happen to me.
No more ballroom dancing for me.
Yeah, everybody, I think, has these kind of conversations that make you kind of think, oh, I've got to stop coasting now. So I went home that evening and I thought, right, I can't do this anymore. And I signed up for a local college because I couldn't afford university anymore that did animation, because I sat down and thought, right, what is it that I always gravitate to? What is it that I really enjoy and I think I should just do? And it was animation. So I signed up for a 2-year college course and quit my job and went back to college. And ironically, when I was in college, I was pretty much the top student of that year because I knew what it was like to get kicked out. So I tried,
it makes you
tried
work
pretty hard.
Yeah.
But working at Blue Zoo, there's a lot of Bournemouth babies. You know, everybody goes to Bournemouth. So yeah, I did a lot of vocational stuff. After my course, I worked for 4 years at a local startup, animation startup, where I was a generalist. I did everything.
It's great that you got into that though.
Yeah, so a lot of I do have a degree, but it's like a foundation degree, you know, it's okay. But I think I cut my chops really working at this startup called Arcus Animation, just simply because when you work for a small startup, they're like, oh, now we need you to do the editing. Now we need you to pitch in and make some assets. Now we need you to do a bit of animation. Now we need a storyboard. What's a storyboard? Oh, it's just, you know, we need a layout for this, you know, NHS advert. And I thought it was really, really fun. And I kept asking, I was like, can I do more of those? And he was like, yeah, sure, you can do them. And I kind of became known as like, oh, we need a storyboard, give it to Alex. Because they didn't actually teach storyboarding at college at all. So
no, I don't think I've ever been taught it.
So even though I have an animation foundation degree, I left with practically zero knowledge of storyboarding. Which in my college's defense, I don't think is just because I went to a college. I think I've heard in universities too that there's just not the scale to teach storyboarding.
Yeah, no, I wasn't taught storyboarding. I did an animation MA, and it was very much project led. So you're sort of like getting on with the projects, but you know, sort of making it up as you go along. You're learning by doing, but yeah, we didn't ever cover
certainly not to the point of being useful for industry. You know, I look back at my college work and I've got some beat boards, maybe if you could call them that, and they were in colour. So not really prepped me for the world of work. But so after I was at Arcus for about 4 years, it was great working there and I learned lots and lots, but you know, you get to a ceiling point, don't you, where I was like, I'm not making the storyboards that I want to, because Arcus were relatively small. They weren't making like long form work. It was all short form. Yeah. So it was all adverts, a lot of BBC Bitesize, which was good to learn. Lots of BBC Bitesize, lots of explainer videos, lots of adverts, lots of web stuff. And I was like, I want to make cartoons. I want to make cartoons and films. I'm not going to learn that here. So I started being quite strict with myself, and I came up with I sort of invented my own university course, I guess. My calendar was crazy back then. I dedicated every spare moment of time I could to leveling myself up. So at lunchtime, I would read storyboarding books like on my own outside, rather than like sit with my workmates. On my commute in, I would listen to the Squiggly podcast, and I would listen to other animation, and not just animation, like inspirational stuff from like Debbie Millman, who's a quite famous brand designer in America, and like other people like that who would just, you know, give me a boost to like keep going. And then at night time, when I would get home at about 6:30 or something, by 8 o'clock I would get back and study, and I used schoolism, and I did Alex Wu's Pixar storyboarding class, which was amazing and worth every penny. I've never gotten better so quickly. I did that for about 3 months. I also did I used to listen to Pixar in a Box on my commute in, videos, and through the Pixar in a Box thing, I think that's Khan Academy. I don't know if that's still around. And they would come up with really great prompts for personal projects, and they would walk you through like, this is how to create a prompt for a storyboard, and how to, you know, everybody likes Pixar for their story, so I figured I'd just go there to learn. And I created quite a few personal boards off of the back of all of this, and a lot of gesture stuff. And then Alex Wu advised that I started urban sketching, so I did that as well. I'd never heard of that before, so that was really good. So then at the weekends, you know, I'd spend all my weekend, all my free time, I'd just go and sit in a cafe, and I'd only find cafes that had good window seats with my sketchbook, and I'd just practice drawing people as they went past and doing it quickly and getting the gesture in. And because of all that, I ended up getting a test for Ron's Gone Wrong from Locksmith Animation Studios, the film that's just come out. I didn't get the position, but to get the test to go from like a small startup doing BBC Bitesize to getting invited to do a test for a film, I thought, oh, I'm on the path here.
Was that something that you applied for, or was it something that sort of came to you?
Yes, I was keeping an eye on Locksmith because they just started, and I thought, oh, this studio looks exciting. Like another animation film studio in London. You know, there's Aardman, and then I can't think of any others actually apart from Aardman that are making like animated films in the UK. So I was excited for them, and I sent them an email with all my gesture work. And it was a very sweet email just saying like, oh, yeah, you'll probably never read this. And, I think you guys are great. And if you've got any work, then just keep me in mind. And they replied.
Yeah.
They said, yeah, we do actually.
Because you've done the work. I think, like, definitely my intake, and I'm sure it happens all the time, of like leaving university and sort of going out for work. Everyone gets swept up in, I've got to like be impressive, I've got to do something impressive, I've got to get people's attention. And actually what you actually have to do is just put the hours in and put the work in and like build.
Yeah, well, I was kind of self-conscious too, because I don't have a amazing looking Bournemouth quality student film, for example. So I knew if I didn't have these things, I had to do a buttload of vocational learning. Always updating my website.
And like, I wonder if there are any things that you notice about storyboarding, like common mistakes that people make or things that you've found, you know?
I mean, I can tell you common mistakes that I make. I don't know. I never feel like I'm in a position enough to, I don't know, maybe I am. I was having this conversation the other day. When do you feel, or is it because we're women? I don't know. But when do you feel comfortable enough to be like, right, I know my chops now. Everybody listen to me. I know exactly what to do. You're doing this wrong. You're doing this right. I'm yet to feel that way. And I'm trying to beat myself out of that because I have been doing this a fair amount of time. And I see men around me having an awful lot of confidence sometimes who've got a lot less expertise.
Yeah, yes. Sometimes I just pretend I'm in my head. I'm like, if I were a man, what would I think now instead? Like, I'd probably be pretty happy with myself.
When I was with Arcus, we went to do a pitch meeting for a BBC Bitesize call out, I suppose, and they had everybody go up to Media City, and the board had this woman on the board. I wish I could remember her name. She just didn't take any shit. She came in, she sat down, she was like, right, why should we give this contract to you? That sort of attitude. And, you know, the blokes that were with me like kind of shit themselves a bit. And but I was looking at her just like, oh God, you're great. And like, I wanted to kind of, you know, it was interesting to see a woman in a high position of power in animation or in that world have that attitude and clearly see the different takes on it. So some people might have seen her as being brash or something, but I didn't. I just saw her as being quite powerful. It was quite liberating, actually.
It's a strange phenomenon, isn't it? Because we get the idea of representation, but you don't really realize how powerful it is until you see, you know, a woman or someone that you identify with in that position, and then it all sort of seems possible. It's like, oh, why couldn't I just be like that? You can
I've got a fantastic mentor as well.
Proper. Yeah, you're going to be. You are allowed to point things out because.
It's finding the way to do it where you have the, what's the phrase? The courage in your own convictions, I guess.
Yeah.
I've got I need to stop calling her a mentor because she came to my wedding and she's a good friend of mine. She started off as a mentor called Catherine Sulkeld. And I met her when I went to train with Blue Zoo in 2016, back when I still didn't know anything about storyboarding. And I saw this traineeship for 6 weeks in London. And I jumped on the chance there. And she's another person who she knows so much, but she doubts herself sometimes. Even though she's got, you look at her credits and she's done everything, and everything she does is fantastic. Everyone who you meet who knows her says what fantastic work she does, and yet sometimes she still says like, oh, well, I'm not sure. You know, it's interesting, isn't it?
A bit of self-doubt, I think, is always healthy. It's good to keep questioning yourself. But then, yeah, it's acknowledging what you have achieved.
If it's the default, though, you have to train yourself the other way.
Yeah. So with where you're at the moment, obviously working for Blue Zoo and like, what's the sort of, is there a regular day for you, or is there a regular week?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm an employee, so there is a regular day. So I've been working remotely for almost coming up probably 6 years now. I keep saying 5 years, but it's probably 6 years. Because storyboard artists like you absolutely do not need to be in the studio.
Yeah,
which works very, very well for me, being in Newcastle. I was born in London, but I live up in Newcastle. And before the pandemic, actually, Blue Zoo kind of had a reputation for, we do not work with remote artists. And it was very frustrating because it was almost like a blanket, like, no. So for a couple of years, I was like, oh, well, I won't bother applying for this and applying for that because they won't let me work remotely. And, you know, I'm sure this happened to a lot of companies. And then the pandemic happened and everybody changed their minds.
They had to.
Well, it doesn't work very well for certain vocations like animation. From what I've heard, animation is a complete nightmare to do remotely. But in terms of storyboarding, it's absolutely fine. So yeah, just your normal 9 to 5. I'm at work today. I'm on Pip and Posy series 2. The client is Magic Light Pictures, and series 1 has just been nominated for a BAFTA or an Emmy. I can't remember. One of the two.
Good. Yeah.
One of the two. Yeah. So it's just your normal work day, really. Just a 9 to 5. Meetings with writers and showrunners and directors, and then given an episode to storyboard out, and then I do it. And then,
what are your favourite things about storyboarding? Like, why storyboarding? I mean, I know you like it, but
because and I say this to students too, who sometimes well, a lot of the time, actually, I've just done a talk, and this is still the most prominent thing with students, is they don't know what they're good at. And they don't know where they should specialize, because you can only really be a generalist if you work for a startup. And so I tell them, like, rather than think of what you're really good at, because that can be hard, think of what you hate.
Yeah.
And it will narrow it down. And I said, so for example, when I was at college, I despised rigging with a passion. I was crap at it. I couldn't do it. Everything I rigged looked shit. So I was like, okay, why should I go down this path? I clearly hate it. And I was like, well, if I hate rigging, I probably shouldn't be an animator, because I'm not really enjoying that either.
Yeah.
And the way that I draw is very quick and messy and sketchy, and I like the quick sort of freedom of, you know, to pick someone quite cliche but still deservedly so, Quentin Blake, you know, that energy that you can have in that sort of like it's done, has always been much more appealing to me than extreme realism, you know, like like concept art stuff.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of respect for concept artists because it's something I could never do.
Yeah.
I don't have the patience to render something into a beautiful like light filtering off of a surface type. I don't have the patience for it. I want it done. So because of that, because I realized that's what I like to do, the nature of storyboarding is that it's like be quick, get gestures in, and expressiveness in minimal strokes.
Do you think so your style naturally plays into storyboarding? Do you think your style has developed, or is it very much your natural way of drawing?
I think a bit of both. When I was at college, I tried to do realistic faces like Louis van Gaal, because I think everybody who was on the internet and the DeviantArt days in the mid 2000s worshipped Louis van Gaal. But what I found was once you learn to do those very realistic faces, it became, to me personally, other people, again, like disclaimer, to other people this might be like their passion and joy, but to me, once I'd figured out how to do those realistic faces, I got quite bored, because I thought, there's only so many ways you can draw a realistic face, you know.
Yeah.
Whereas if you go towards something that's more stylized, so for example, animated movies that chase realism, 3D realism, I feel never stand the test of time. Animated movies that have a style of their own do stand the test of time, and people will be talking about them in 10, 20, 30 years time, and it'll still be like, oh, it's great though, isn't it? Versus like an animated movie that was like, oh wow, this is as realistic as we could possibly get it.
There's something about those as well with animation. You get into like the uncanny valley with
of course,
and people actually don't, like, it's not what they want. Like that's what live action is for, and it's almost why would we make animation emulate real life? We already have real life. Like
so I think finding a style is very difficult. But once I moved away from realism, I was having a lot more fun and becoming a lot more loose, and especially once I found gesture drawing, because I didn't know what that was.
I know Squiggly have already covered the short that you directed, but to talk about it a bit, because how it worked was that everyone pitched ideas, right, and then your idea got chosen.
Yes, and I was quite surprised, as I think was Tom Box, bless him.
Really?
So I'll paint you a little picture.
Yeah.
My baby is 5 months old at this point, and I'm going a little bit crazy, little bit cabin fever, a little bit of just like, you know, breastfeeding every hour, going a little bit nuts, just standard new mum stuff. And because I'm a workaholic, I suppose, I kept looking at work emails, because why not? And I saw this call out, and I was like, well, I'm still on the books, even though I'm on maternity leave. And so I thought,
that's amazing.
I'm going to pitch for this. And I managed to get my daughter down for a nap, and I was like, right, I've got to bloody do this quick, because she only ever napped for about 20 minutes back then. And I ran into the other room, and I got my phone, and I read through the brief, and I was like, right, okay, I'm going to do some like super quick research. I'm going to research this. I'm going to research that. I'm going to look up this person. I'm going to look up the charity. I'm going to look up Ben at the charity and watch one of his talks. I'm going to do this. I got an idea, and I just turned my phone on and filmed myself pitching an idea. And then that evening, I sketched out something on my iPad. I think I finished it off with my daughter in my arm and my other hand, like on the sofa, finishing it off. And then I sent it. I remember, because the deadline for sending it in was coming up, but then my daughter started crying and screaming. And, you know, the only thing that settled her down back then was going for a walk in the park, and it was raining. So I remember I had an umbrella over me like this, pushing a pram with this, and I had my phone, and I was sending this like, this is my pitch for this thing coming up, please accept. Okay, bye.
You should storyboard this.
Yeah, I should. And that was fun to do, to break a little bit of the monotony of those very early days of maternity leave. And it was fun, and I thought, I'm quite proud of myself, and it is a good idea, and I do like the pitch, and I was doing it seriously, but I was also doing it for kind of my own health. And then it was very surprising when Tom came back, and he said, oh, I really want to put your pitch forward, but it's in the wrong format, and it's and you need to do this and you need to do that to it. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry, Tom, I don't really have the time to do this now, because now, I have these very small pockets in the day that I can do things. And I said, don't worry about it. It was a shot in the dark type thing. And he said, no, I'll help out. So he actually fixed my pitch for me with the submission.
What was wrong with the pitch?
Oh, it's nothing wrong with the actual pitch itself. It's just, they asked for it in a certain format.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And uploading things and I don't know, the more technical stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So he submitted it, and then I got this email coming back saying, yeah, the charity really liked yours. So now we have to work out how to have you on as a director. And you're still on maternity leave. So these things called kit days, keeping in touch days, that I was able to work basically whilst on maternity leave and get paid for this. Yeah. So everything was fair and everything made sense. But yeah, it was, and then all of a sudden I found myself in directors' meetings, which was something I'd never done before.
Mm.
And it was great. It was really, really great. And
was it something you'd wanted to do, or was it like a total? Yeah.
I've had my own ideas for cartoons that I'd like to pitch for a few years now, but never really never really had the time, I suppose, to package it all together for a pitch document. And then where do I pitch it to? Who do I send it to, etc., etc. But I'm sure that's not uncommon. I'm sure loads of people that work in animation have a similar story.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was really, really great to be involved in that level, and I'd like to do it again. And yeah, I think I did a good job. So I'd like to continue doing that. But yeah, it was kind of a little bit spooky working with Tom Box, because he's like the owner of Blue Zoo.
Mm-hmm.
So it was. I wonder how he'd feel about me voicing it this way. I guess how I'm saying it is, he's probably forgotten in his day-to-day work life how much of a big deal he is.
Yeah.
And if you work for Blue Zoo, to just be like having a chat with Tom Box about something together, especially if we disagreed on something, that was interesting. That was interesting, of how much do I push that, like, no, I believe that this is the right answer, and how much do I bend that, like, he's the big boss.
Yeah.
And he also has a lot of experience, so he probably knows what he's talking about as well. Yeah. So I found those dynamics really interesting, and also I learned a lot from him in the way that he conducts himself in these type meetings. He was always very calm, extremely organized, and he has this way of getting to the point in a quite firm way, but also in a way that made you really believe that he was the guy who could get this done properly. Like, you really did believe in him.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I want to sort of I felt like I learned a lot working with him, but yeah, initially in the early days it was a bit spooky.
Yeah. So what was important to you about that story that you sort of like were pushing for throughout the process?
I was very aware that I'm not a teenage boy.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of wanted to go above and beyond, and any time that a decision was being made that I felt was too frilly, too girly, and was done with the intention of appealing to girls, I pushed back on it. Because I was constantly thinking, is this something a teenage boy? Because the charity had very specifically said, our demographic that we want this to appeal to is teenage boys. That's the whole point of the charity. And that is not to say that teenage girls as a demographic don't matter, but in the case of this charity and what the work that this charity does, this short had to appeal to teenage boys first and foremost. So just little things as like, I don't know, making sure that the mates and the group of friends were, they were able to like laugh at him when he got pushed down a flight of stairs and stuff. Because that's what a bunch of like mates do. I mean, I don't think that's just a boy or girl thing. You know, that's something that me and my friends would do as well. Somebody at high school would trip up down the stairs. You wouldn't be like, oh my gosh, are you okay? You'd be like, you know, it's tricky to put those things into like, this is the feminine response, this is the masculine response. But I think you do kind of have to in some ways, because there was a conversation of like, well, is this, you know, could that be seen as bullying if they're laughing at him after he falls down the stairs? And I was like, no, remember what it's like when you were at high school. You didn't think you were getting bullied by your friends. If you tripped up and fell on your face, you were like, oh shit, I've fallen down. Like it's just. So I was constantly thinking like, I'm a teenage boy.
Yeah.
Stuff like, you know, just having them be rude, and like the emojis that they're using about like talking about a tits and arse, and it's all had to be focused around that, like, oh, look at her, she's got a great arse type thing, and not sugarcoating it, because that's pointless.
Yeah. And it is
then again,
difficult age, teenagedom. It's not adults, but they're not children, and it is that uncomfortable zone where it's like,
yeah,
they know what sex is. Yeah.
There was also some really interesting conversations about the end of the short, which was not just me pushing things. It was for us all trying to get to an ending that made a lot of sense, because initially we had the boy and the girl smiling at each other as if everything was forgiven and everything was fine. That was a bit too, he's got the girl.
Yeah.
Which is not the point. The point of like addressing these sort of behaviors is not to get the girl. It's so you can, you know, just look into yourself and the type of person who you are for yourself. It's got nothing actually to do with girls. It's to do with like, how are you feeling about the way that you're responding to these outside influences? But you know, it had to have some bit of like a happy ending, so to speak, so that you didn't end on like a absolute downer. So she kind of, when she notices him coming in and she sees him struggling with this armor, and then she kind of just goes, oh, like, what are you like, type thing, and and then carries on her conversation with her friend. And the way I explained that is, it's like, as a girl at school, you get harassed constantly by boys every single day. And these boys a lot of the time are your friends, and boys who perhaps started off as being dickheads can become your friends. In high school, this can happen. Mm-hmm. You know, it doesn't take very long for two students to be, oh my God, I hate him, how could he do that to me? To that person in high school has the capacity to change and develop and grow. And you can have those just like, oh yeah, he was a dickhead to me last year, but whatever, he's fine now. And it's not brushing things off, and it's not saying that these things, you know, he shouldn't have done this and he shouldn't have done that. But I feel like in high school there is that little cocoon of learning and forgiveness that is a lot more wider than when you're grown adults, and these type of behaviors would be like, I'm going to call the police, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and that opportunity to become a better person sort of has to be given then, because of the
so it's not like oh well, everything's sorted now he's a good person. It's sort of like, this is the start of, okay, he's now, tomorrow's a new day type thing.
Yeah, I really
it's
like...
also a case of like, she can't be absolutely devastated by this, these things that are happening to her, because again, it happens to you every day in school.
Yeah.
And if every single boy who pinched your ass at school, if that upset you every single day at school, you'd spend your whole time at school being devastated. It's just not realistic. I don't think like women and girls would say like, well, that's not how it was. You just kind of have to deal. Unfortunately,
yeah. And I like the ending, because it does have that, like, the facial expressions are very subtle and the actions are very subtle, and it's sort of no one says really sorry, and no one says, oh, I forgive you, and like there's nothing. It's just that it's the sense that, which you don't want to get it's really difficult in those situations. You don't want to get like corny or too moral.
It was hard.
Do you feel good about yourself really, or do you feel a bit sleazy and grimy?
And it wasn't. You're not supposed to be finger pointing either, because that doesn't help anyone.
Yeah.
Who wants to be told what to do in an animated short? It's just about like thinking about, or starting a thought in your head about, oh, I recognize that action. Maybe I've done that myself.
Mm-hmm. And that feeling, like at school as well, it's really hard to not give in to peer pressure. Like,
yeah, exactly. That's why he's not a bad person. These groups of mates around him, they're not. No one's a bad person in this short. It's
starting really to think about yourself as an individual. Like, who am I? Yeah, definitely.
Everybody can think of something that they did in high school that they're not proud of, that they did because everybody around them was egging you on, or something that you didn't call out. You know, everybody can think of something like that.
Yeah, definitely.
So, yeah, it was tricky, but those subtle emotions, Blue Zoo's always been really good at. Interestingly, the series I'm on at the moment, Pip and Posy, I got the job because they said they liked my subtle character expressions, which Pip and Posy sometimes annoyingly is a very subtle show. We're not allowed to do big gestures like, hi Pip, I'm Posy. Like everything's very subtle in Pip and Posy. So yeah, similar.
You're sort of like psychologically studying human behavior all the time.
Yeah, it's a bit creepy.
I think it's really interesting.
Well, it's interesting because I came off of number blocks. So to go from number blocks to Pip, number blocks is all, hi, everybody, I'm number one. So yeah, that was interesting.
So what's next for you?
I'm on Pip and Posy until March.
Yeah.
And then the storyboarding dance begins again. As I'm sure it's with a lot of other
acting.
Yeah, well that would be great. If I can see some opportunities on the horizon for directing. Who I'd have to go up against, I'm not sure I could beat right now.
Best not to think about that. That's not the right attitude, is it? And it's that's not the way to think about things. But I've always got ideas for like way in the future, like that sort of like 5-year sort of plan thing. But I'd like to do more directing, more storyboarding, just more of the same, really. It's been amazing talking to you. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's been lovely to meet you.
I'll just say bye before it kicks me out of the system again.
Lovely to
speak to you. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thanks to Alex Davy and Penny Whitehouse for that wonderful chat, and to see more of Alex's work, you can find her on Instagram and Twitter at Alexandra Davy. Her website is alexdavy.net, and Davy is spelled D-A-V-Y. And for more of the wonderful work of Blue Zoo, check out blue-zoo.co.uk. And for all your animation news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, and such like, you'll want to follow Squiggly too. We're on Twitter at Squiggly, Instagram at Squiggly Animation, and Facebook.com/Squiggly Magazine. Our website, where all the magic happens, is squiggly.com. If you're watching this episode on YouTube, be sure to smack those like and subscribe buttons. And if you don't want to miss out on any of our delightful podcasts, subscribe to Squiggly's animation podcasts via the platform of your preference. I've been Ben Mitchell, and you've all been wonderful. Until next time, happy animating.